family. And then when Grandma and Grandpa built the house, they built it, we think probably in the teens.
Late teens, early 20s.
Late teens or early 20s. And so that was my spot. You know, that was my comfort spot, to go out to their house. So I would go out there and always liked Grandpa's garden. My grandpa was a gardener. They always said he was in poor health, but he'd be happy sitting on his little chair digging potatoes for somebody. You know, that's just Grandpa. And he was a C&O welder, and all during the Depression and all during World War II, he provided food for the workers and for all of the families around. So I've always looked out over that field and loved it. And they still had a garden there at that time, because I remember going out and getting strawberries. You could eat your way back and forth, and then Grandma would make great big platters. She didn't make little cakes, she made like a great big platter that she just, you know, took it all apart, a big biscuit. So I have nothing but wonderful feelings for the farm that we're on, and I knew that it was used so much in World War II, Depression in World War II. During both of the World Wars, we're opposing industrial nations that were trying to conquer each other, and it strained their infrastructure to the breaking point, particularly in Europe, because there it was fought on the land, their land, and it devastated the land. So what they had in farmland before was devastated. I want to show you one of the things here. I have put things up, and then I'm going to pass some things around. You don't think about, you know, we think about how bad it was here, and we did our gardens, and it was wonderful. They had gardens there. This garden is made from crater. That's a bomb crater. This one I can read you was Westminster. It was a crater near Westminster Cathedral. And so they made the use just kind of in their face. That is one spot that we would use. So we talk about our situation here, and yes, we needed the patriotism and we needed the support, but their land was absolutely devastated. During World War II, the crisis was in agriculture. Workers were also recruited, so that they went off to fight in the war, and there were not that many that could stay home and do the gardens, and the farms over there became their battlefields. And they were starving. In 1917, in March, Charles Lathrop Hack organized a War Garden Commission. He encouraged Americans and inspired them to start a war effort for our allies. And this was just weeks before we actually entered the war. But he had appealed to the people that for us to form gardens for our allies, and then we were entering the war. They utilized any type of land, anything that was idle. It could be a yard, it could be a school. We're going to talk about schools, because that's what kind of fascinated me when I found about the school garden. And then some people were working with schools, and I talked to them about that. They used company grounds, parks, backyards, vacant lots, rooftops, and this is another one of my favorite ones that I like so well. This is available too. This is children, and I just think this is the sweetest picture. But these are children using a rooftop garden. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, it is. And I'm not sure if that's World War I or II, to be honest with you, I don't know. No, it must be II, there's a car. Okay, World War II. But I think what they encouraged people, just to any type of thing that wasn't already being used, as well as farm grounds, but anything that they could put plants into or seeds into, they wanted them to do. Enormous amounts of food could be produced by millions of family gardens with no loss to crucial industrial man hours that were needed in the factories, and there was no transportation expense, which freed up transportation for wartime. The trucks, the trains that were hauling goods as well as soldiers. It freed up the things for them. I made a little display back here which shows with my gardens that 9 to 10 million tons of fruit and vegetables were harvested from Victor Gardens. So they really did work. They really helped up. Major media of the day was newspapers, advertisements, and posters. And I have to tell you, This was one of the reasons that I particularly got interested in it. I love these posters. They are propaganda posters. It was very patriotic, and it made them feel as if they were a part of the home front doing something when they had sent their boys off to fight a war. This first one was, sow the seeds of victory, plant and raise your own vegetables, write to the National War Garden Commission, Washington, D.C. for free books on gardening, canning, and drawing. Every garden, a munitions plant. And as we go through these, you'll see that they make an analogy between the gardens, the hoes, the rakes, anything that they're using. I have one down here that I didn't get up, which is in my barn. It's the tractor, and we have a farm haul tractor, and it was driving the farm haul tractor, and it was a war implement. So I grabbed that. And then this is just another one. Grow it yourself, plant a farm garden. And again, you just see everything colorful. One time I've done some of my reading, and there's more that you can know about this than what I'll be able to share with you. Someone said, look at her nose. She's just kind of going there, sowing seeds, but she's kind of got her nose in. Civic organizations, chambers of commerce, and schools. Women throughout the country stepped up to organize and to register volunteers for war work. Research from the women's section of the Indiana State Council of Defense World War I, 1914-18, and it had a lot of information on what they had was a process of registration. And that was that you would fill out a card, you would register, and we would know your areas of expertise. Are you a nurse? Are you a teacher? So that if they needed something and they had an influenza breakout, then they could call on people, the women that they had in their registration, their cards, and they would double, and they could get them immediately referring to that registration card. What was interesting, it started at a national level, and then it went down to a state level, then it went down to a county level, a township, and then a precinct. So they really went down, and I think the success of it was through good communication. One of the ones that I looked up was called the Food Production Committee. 3 different objectives. The first one was to stimulate food production in clubs and to get in touch with Purdue University. And of course, I'm a Purdue grad, so I was, yes. And Master Gardeners are part of Purdue. But back then, it was an agricultural college. And so in Indiana, it was the Purdue. And they would get aid and advice in gardening. And then they wanted to avoid duplication of organization or food production so that they would know where the different produce was being made and that you weren't doing the same thing. We had 10 gardens that were just tomatoes. Do you know what I'm saying? So that they wanted to know where all of the different food were. And the last thing, to get patriotism in the backyard. And I think with here, this was another one. The Women's Land Army of America. Women enlist and now help farmers fight the food famine, and then how you could apply. And I think, and again, you have the flag. As we get into here, we're more cartoon with the characters. Or in World War I, you know, again though, you see everything that they have. They are on a mission. They're on a horse with a flag. And the analogy they wanted to make, that you don't have guns and you don't have bullets, but you have seeds and hoes and rakes and plots of land. The encouragement was to carry out plans for more and better gardens, and a lot of the newspapers were very active in this. They were very personal, and they told who was where and what they did and who was sick and how they're feeling and everything. They did the same thing with the gardens. And they had whole sections there with notes and hints in their newspaper. And they also formed a seed exchange and furnished plans. And these would be published in the newspaper. That's World War II. Never mind, not there yet. Another of the committees in this one pamphlet I was telling you about was for the Home Economics Director. The women's section of the State Council of Defense, these chairmen gave demonstrations. So they would come in and they would show, the first one they had was a potato campaign. You can imagine what that, How many have ever planted potatoes? You have to know what you're doing to plant a potato. These chairmen gave demonstrations, so they knew how to cut, they knew how to do everything, so that they could get the maximum out of their garden. So that was one of them. The second one was a wheatless campaign. So they gave recipes, and they gave ideas for foods that you could use using other things other than wheat, or ways that you could prepare your meals. The third was a conservation exhibit. So apparently county fairs were still going on. I didn't realize that, but they had conservation exhibits there. And so that was another part where they had an Indiana bulletin that gave recipes. And I was looking for this. Keith helped me put things up. Oh, here it is. I think this is cute. This was World War II, but they had showed pictures of people eating the food and having prepared their vegetables in a different way, so that they wanted them to know the different ways that you could fix a vegetable. They had a sugar saving campaign during canning season, and the 6th and 7th were producing bulletins from the Extension Office of Purdue, and that helped with the canning. And if there was people that, if they had an excessive product and they were going to put it into a factory, a lot of the people that were permanently or were doing their own home gardening would go in and help with the canning factories. So that was a part of it too. One of the things that came up was the school gardens. And I thought that was really interesting. And feel certain that this was part of a school garden. And that I found very, very interesting. And I'm going to pass some pictures around because we have a school garden. The first known school garden was Putnam Grammar School in Boston. And it was in 1891. It was a teacher's college. They trained teachers in gardening, and it was garden-based. The program gained ground when the federal government set up the Bureau of Education's Office of School and Home Gardening, which continued from 1914 to 1920. Outside of school, children's gardens were often a larger part of civic beautification campaigns. However, with the support of the women's clubs, the garden became a practical gardening teaching tool for them, where they taught the children thrift, industry, service, patriotism, responsibility. And there were, I don't think I wrote this down, there were, teachers could go away to school and they educated them to teach gardening in the schools. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So that you could, probably in the elementary, I'm guessing, that would have been a part of the elementary program. This was a garden. It extends out. I would love to make a bigger picture of this first one with the kid and his dog. I think that is the cutest thing. And this was the information, and I want you guys to come up and look at this. This was 130 schools children participated in this first garden. Miss Ruth Shulman, a 6th grade teacher at Central School, worked out all the garden on paper. The land belonging to the Kreutzer estate was donated for the purpose. It was located between the Wabash Railroad, Wayne Street, Benton Street, and 9th Street. Wow. Feel for where that was. Yeah. Before they ever ventured out to do anything in the ground, they worked everything out on paper. Plots were drawn. The positioning of each seed to be planted was decided. And then they took all of that, and I can just see this having talked out into the hallways. You can just get a picture of what that looked like. Out in the hallways, they laid everything out as it would be, and they used brooms instead of hose, so that the kids could get a feel for that. I have, when I've done these before, people didn't exactly know how to use a hoe. You know, they might be doing something completely like this, so they had to be educated how to use the tools. And they had a whole series of cartoons that showed this, do this, not this, so it was interesting. Also, they had a janitor who brought in boxes of dirt. And he was a gardener, I guess, in the summertime. And he brought in boxes of dirt and he showed them how you plant seeds. So by the time they got to the garden, they didn't require a lot of assistance because they'd been through a lot. Their ages ranged from 7 to 15, and some of the younger ones received help from their parents. And if you look at those pictures, you can see there are parents in there with them helping, and dogs. There was also a man by the name of Dudley Bratton, and he painted a huge sign that said Juvenile Garden, because he wanted the people who were riding on the Wabash train to see that this was Peru's juvenile garden. The produce was sold house to house. Miss Shawman went with the students so that they could sell their produce. See if there's anything else I want to share with you about one. Well, I love this. These are two new ones for me. Raised them myself in my U.S. school garden and joined the United States School Garden Army, and those are reproductions of actual World War I posters. Right to the United States School Garden Army, Bureau of Education, Department of Interior, Washington, D.C. This is another one that was World War I. I had bought this earlier in the background. And again, food is ammunition. Food is ammunition, don't waste it. And you think about how we are now and the way we waste it. And they did not waste. You know, it was a sin to waste food because it was so valuable. Then there were two things here. These are just little ones that I took off the net. Save money the easy way, grow a garden. It's thrifty, it's patriotic, plant today, and then your own vegetables all year round if you dig for victory now. That were reasons that they made gardens in World War I, or reasons that they made gardens in World War II. In some ways it was easier because now we had radios and we had machinery. And in World War I we did not have that. They still wanted to use their posters, and they, I think if anything, probably amped up the ammunition, because if you can see this one, to me, that is like an analogy of a piece of equipment. Do you know what I'm saying? Almost like a gun that goes up or something like that. And then the corn here, along with all of the tanks and everything like that. So they amped it up a bit when you got to World War II.
And wouldn't you think the children of World War I were the adults in World War II, and they could teach their own children? And
one of the things they said too, and I wasn't aware of it when I was reading these, was the fact that there still were rations after World War I to World War II. Things were still rationed. I guess I didn't realize that it didn't quite recover between the two wars. There was a Victory Garden Leader's Handbook that I had pulled when I was doing my first research on this. And the quote from that is from one of the leaders. As a nation, quote, we have always taken food pretty much for granted. Not the farmers, of course. Food's a step of life is made for a farmer, but the rest of us haven't had that. We have always had the idea in mind that there's always plenty of food if we just have the money to buy it. Now we're learning that as a nation or group of nations is no stronger than its food supply. We have stopped taking food for granted. And I thought, I like the quote, a nation is no stronger than its food supply. We also, when I said they added things, they also added the refrigeration. Lockers were now part of it. People might not have had a freezer at their home, but they had a public locker that they could put down and use. In the home front, and let me show you some pictures of it. This is one that I got, and I will pass this around. This was all a newspaper in Miami County that was passed out. And, you know, I said that they still did the newspapers, but it has the sign for the Victory Garden, and I made a copy. They had shown one of the gardens. And this garden was 100 feet by 20-some. And one of the things that I realized when I was doing this, and if I thought I could have had enough chance time and knew where I was gonna be, I wanted to reproduce a garden so you could see how in a small plot they planted seasonally so that they had a garden that went, when this is done, this goes in, so that they had that. And I do want you guys to please feel free to come up and look at these. But this victory garden, here was some of the things I told you that they had cartoons. And there was a cartoon where everybody's deciding, like in their little community, what they want to put in, and the kid wants to grow spaghetti. And then, I guess we can claim credit for these tomatoes in cooking. And then, again, a child in the garden there, extra dividends we all used, and the children here. But I'll leave this. This was a whole newspaper. I'll leave these in. Please come up and look at everything. Okay, and here's a picture which was taken. And this was a group that they had formed their own community garden. So they're very proud of their produce. People relied on canned goods and rationing, and the allotment wouldn't feed the family. Their few canned goods were on the shelves, such as metal and tin were in supply. The supplies were cut. They were rationed, and so they did not have those. So they had to can their own, freeze their own, dry their own. Some of the things actually showed how you could dig down and make like a root cellar in the ground so that you could keep, you know, the squash and the things that you needed to do that. Railroads and trucks were used in the war effort for munition and soldiers rather than shipping bulky fresh foods over distances. And again, this is the idea that you don't ship, because there was not only were they moving munition and soldiers, it was taking a lot of gas, or gasoline, so that the fuel for trucks to move big produce was one of the things that they didn't use. So you produced it here and it was used right here. It was the most efficient way of having a garden. Shortages did occur because of the forced internment of Japanese Americans. These farmers were responsible for 40% of the vegetables in California, but was valued at $40 million annually. The Japanese farmers were forced to leave about 200,000 acres. The land was transferred to European immigrants, and they did not know how to farm the land as the Japanese had farmed the land. American's #1 war worker, what he does, why he does it, and why, and it's all about the American farmer, which is really, it's a really cool magazine. If you're welcome to come up and look at this, and this is one that I had on my wall in my barn. And he drives a weapon. And I was particularly interested because it was a farm wall. And Daddy had a farm wall. So anyway, but the whole thing is, in the fields of home, foreign battlefields, farmers are driving the machines of war. Nearly 2 million farm boys are in the armed forces. Their weapons are tanks, anti-aircraft guns, powerful crawler trailers, and great engines in the bombers. Here at home, the history's greatest battle is for food. Every farm machine is mobilized. This year, every tractor operator drives a weapon in the war for victory and freedom, and the greatest of these is farming. Of course, they want to produce that. When the young farmers return with their victory, they must take over and carry on. Food must right the peace. He's armed. He doesn't have a gun, but, and he's walking, he's very self-assured, so that's another plus that they had with the propaganda effort. He has a pitchfork instead of a gun, and he's walking very self-assured. They also used as a language, a vacant lot was commandeered for the war effort. So even in the language that they used, they likened it to things that were military. This I thought was interesting. This was from World War II. Urban residents also had heeded the call. This is buying Victory Garden seeds. So you can see that that was a busy place that they could be. And they also did seed saving. And that was kind of associated through the ladies groups, through the newspapers. This was an example of one of the different examples of those. They put them any place they could. This is one that is in New York City. Mayor LaGuardia had told them he couldn't be responsible if things got stolen out of the garden, which I thought was interesting. But they did a lot of rooftop gardens in their apartments. They also had them in pots, in window boxes. And one of the things that I thought was interesting when they did these, that they said, you really have to be careful about where you go. First of all, it's tall buildings, so you have to make sure that there's adequate sunshine. And you have to make sure that it isn't polluted, because there was so much from the ash and from the pollution of living in a city. But they did that, and then this was unlike, this was just a small garden. You can see from all different sizes. And I love this because I'm particularly nut about the blue star. Those are blue stars. This lady has 2 of her family fighting in World War. This is World War II. Golf courses. And sometimes a sports field would be used to graze sheep. So any little bit of land that they could possibly use, they did. The gardening that they had here, this would have been like an individual group. It wasn't like the professional canning thing.
Be like a church group.
Church group, ladies group, absolutely. And they snapped beans and they put up the beans. So that you really had an involvement from the buying of the seeds, the beans, the growing of the garden. And let's see, plant a garden for victory. Again, you have that. And get your farm in the fight. Use conservation methods for bigger yields. I think that's it. One of the things that they had at the time was rationing. And I don't know if any of you have heard the stories from rationing.
Oh, we had rationing.
You had rationing, and you know what? I bet I didn't get my dad's or my grandma's and
I remember the
I still have my grandmother's books. It was interesting because I could see how old she was, her height, her weight, and her eye color. She was 58, and I tried to figure out, so she was like in her latter 70s when she died.
My mother had a can of coconut that she was saving for coconut meringue pie for her birthday, and my brother found it in the cupboard and ate it, and my mother cried. Because she didn't think she could replace it.
Right. There are so many sweet stories that have come out of the rationing. This was my mother's, and I don't know why. Hopefully it's around here some. This was my mother's. Well, here's a little fellow here. This little little boy is rationing and scrap guides. Eager schoolboy gets his first experience in using his World War ration book. With many parents engaged in war, children are being taught to face the point of rationing for helping out in family marketing, sure that they had good food. They did use pesticides. They did use herbicides, because there's a thing there where they show one of these cartoons where they're spraying away at it. But here they have save empty tin cans, save waste fat. I suppose that's where they did the bacon and the thing there. Pointers for point rationing. Eat other foods you like, meat, fish, or poultry. You can substitute dried beans, peas, nuts. Eggs, at least 3 or 4 a week. Cook as you choose. But then they had ways to save butter when it's scarce. And just so many neat ideas.
How did they do that? Because butter goes rancid, so did...
Make pats smaller.
We had...
One of the first things, make pats smaller. Or if served in one piece on a plate, caution families to take a smaller helping so none will be left on bread and butter on their plates.
Wow.
Okay. Add butter to hot vegetables after they are in the serving dish or on the plate. Then none will be left in a saucepan. Measure the butter level. Use margarine, salad oil, or vegetable shortening for greasing pans. Use bacon or sausage drippings or chicken or meat fat for sauteing such foods as white or sweet potatoes, eggplant, tomatoes. So they had that, coffee saving, coffee stretchers. So oatmeal meatloaf. But this is fascinating thing, one egg jelly cake. So I thought that was interesting, and I do have their ration books, but
You got margarine in a plastic bag with a little bubble of yellow, and then you went like this, and that was my job.
you worked it. You made it look like butter. I remember one of the gals I taught with was saying that was her job. The canning, and then the little girl looking up at her mother, we'll have lots to eat this winter, mother, won't we, mother? Grow your own and can your own. Two veggies that came out of there were Swiss chard and kohlrabi.
Really?
They were easy to grow. So they had a lot of kohlrabi and Swiss chard. So you can see a whole list of the different things and when they interplanted them. And I'm going to give you another one of the handouts that I had that I got from the Smithsonian. If you want to grow your own victory garden, you can. Make sure everybody gets, this was from the Smithsonian. I would love to go there. I can't remember. Have any of you been to see the Smithsonian Victory Garden? There is one. They have a house here. And they have a house and they have set up a victory garden. And the house within these walls, it's a story and a half, and you discover Mary Scott and her family who lived in this house during World War II and contributed to the war effort. You can view the kitchen where she preserved her vegetables, and you can look out and see a garden. And what I like here, the way that they designed this, and I'm not going to read it to you, you guys take your time and do that. But I went out as a lit teacher, I was thrilled to get to see what Ogden Nash said.
Yes.
Today, my friends, I beg your pardon, but I'd like to speak my victory garden. With a hoe and a sword and a citronella for armor, I ventured forth and became a farmer. Ogden Nash. But it tells you how you can lay the groundwork, and I suppose if you don't know how to double dig something, then you're gonna, you may need to look something up, but that's okay. They tell you your spring garden and how to plant it. For a head start in your garden, you may want to start some of them 5 to 6 weeks, 7 weeks ahead. And in April right now, you are continuing to plant indoors and beginning to harvest your early greens. And over here, these are the World War II vegetables. Available still. Vegetables need room to grow, and as your gardens grow, thin the rows. And you can see from May to August then. And again, these are things that you would be adding in: the basil, bush beans. One of the ones that I saw was really interesting. When the garden was done, they made teepees all the way around for the beans. So they didn't have the beans within the garden, but they had them all around. So, gives you the whole rundown of what you would do. And you can do a fall winter garden. And with your fall winter garden, you can do your beets and broccoli and cabbage, spinach, Swiss chard. And this is fascinating, it really is. The government encouraged citizens during both wars to grow front and backyards, free up their resources that were needed for the military. Today, people start gardens to grow their own food for a variety of reasons. Save money, be more in touch with nature, lessen environmental impact, have confidence in the safety of your own food. It is talking about responsibility, taking back responsibility and control of your own food supply. Some people back in the 60s, and I was there, the 60s and the 70s, it was a back to land movement. And a lot of it was communes that were formed so that they would be totally self-sufficient. Again, it was getting more in touch with nature. One of the things that they did, and I think this is interesting, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of it was fueled by negatives in modern life. They didn't want consumerism. They were very concerned about air and water pollution, as we still are and should be. And anyway, and there were publications that were out. Scott and Helen Nearing's Living the Good Life was one of them. Also, the Whole Earth Catalog. Any of you have or seen the Whole Earth big black catalog? Yeah, that was back in the day. And there was one the Mother Earth News, which is now still a publication. But that was all back in the hippy-dippy days when everybody was going back and doing their own. But those things gave personal articles, gave you how-tos, gave you lots of design ideas, carpentry, masonry. Now, many people feel that our global debt, that our crazy and our erratic weather, and fires and drought, they want food security. They don't want to have it moved from someplace else. And that it will be a big deal in coming. One that is called the Modern Victory Garden. And they have beautiful posters. I couldn't afford all of them. I got one of them, but they're gorgeous. But they have one for pollinators, and they have one for a whole lot of things. But at any rate, plant an urban farm garden. And they have one, this one here, grow food. And they've got the guy with us there. Grow a modern victory garden, and again, that's a plot there. And this was one that I got the first page out of, and again, it's attainable, it's sustainable. These are, for the amount of things that you plant, your yield. For instance, a snap bean bush could yield 30 pounds of product, if cared for, if done right, okay? Beets, carrots, and so it tells you basically for what you're going to be putting in, what your yield could or should be, so that you have an idea with your garden. Victory gardens can be started for pennies. Seeds don't cost a lot. There's a lot of people that share and save. How many of you share seeds or save plants? You know, somebody gets a little part of it, okay? Seeds and soil are all you need. Gardens don't have to be fancy. Even growing tomatoes, peppers, and herbs can cut your grocery bill. Just those things. Even the smallest of spaces can grow produce. Flower pots, grow bags. You can take a whole bag of soil and cut it and put things in it. You don't have to have a whole raised bed. Hanging baskets work well to grow lettuce. Nothing. You can supplement your meals for pennies. Just one tomato plant can grow anywhere from 8 to 10 pounds of tomatoes. And you can use those as side dishes or meatless dish. Garden can help you appreciate what you have. When you take time to nurture something and help it grow, you tend to appreciate it more. Why are people thinking about it today? It's hard work, but it's still a luxury for us. We don't have to go. It's not like World War I. If you didn't have it in the ground, you weren't going to eat. We have the luxury. However, if we screw up or the weather kills us, we do go to the store and we can save ourselves that way. So it's not as if we absolutely have to. It is a luxury for us to do it. And it improves our lives. A lot of online resources that you can get into. Just a lot of things that you can find. One of the nice things is average produce travels 1,500 miles to get to our tables. Petroleum, refrigeration, and you don't know about the pesticides and the fertilizers. The last advantage is that I love this, it's good for the soul. It's a good place to reconnect with what's important in life and literally to stay grounded. There are people, I have 2 people with me today that are involved in this, and then I brought pictures from someone. Austina and Edmund, Austina Reed and Edmund, have, you don't need to, if you want to go in, they have a garden that they employ students with. And do you guys want to say anything, or you don't have to, but we do have things going on, I guess we do have neat things going on in our community. That's the key. We have a program called iGrow. And this is at Garden Gate, and I'm going to leave this up. Please look at it. It's so neat. Diana Payne is in charge of it. And Peru Garden Club does a lot of things to sponsor it with money. Well, we have, Julie works there. You work there. I work there. Diana worked there. We have a lot of master gardeners that are involved. And it is working with children. They have not set up, there's no cost to the children. A requirement that they are there for how many?
Usually 8 weeks.
8 weeks, okay. So I know it starts in June. So it'll go there. And if you are interested in helping with any of these things, you don't have to teach the class, but there are a lot of kids that just need someone there, you know, getting them to where they need to be, you know? And, you know, it's, and the things with you guys, so you're on your own with this ACEs,
Our company is called ACES Plus.
okay,
And we're health strategists. We consult with a variety of people and organizations. And we started here in Peru with a garden across from the junior high school. It became very apparent to us very quickly that income is important, and income for a youth is important. And so we looked for ways that we could hire students. We've hired 10 students over the past 3 years, and we're very excited for this season. We were just awarded a grant. We just found out yesterday, really. And so we're very excited that the state has been supportive of our efforts and will give us an opportunity to serve 10 more students. And so we're very excited, and we'd love an opportunity if you would like to come out to our gardens and serve in some mentorship capacity. We'd love to roll up our sleeves and brainstorm with you what that could look like. Just let us know. I'm Vincent Edmonds, and my partner Austina Reed is, her family is originally from Peru, and so this is our home.
We've got roots here.
I came back to my roots too.
Exactly.
Kind roots, okay. Yeah. Sheriff, you're working, and are you working, who else is working with you, with North Miami kids?
We're going to, yes. We just haven't gotten started yet, but we want to.
They're doing
Then we're having one at our church also.
see, I think, you know, I've seen things on Facebook, and then you post, do kids need to know how to garden, and you just, yes.
But they need to know what to do with it when it comes on, so you need a facility that you can teach
Yeah.
them how to fix it, or how to can it, how to freeze it. And we've found that they're more apt to eat these foods if they raise them themselves and are involved in fixing them. You know, a lot of kids don't like vegetables or any of that stuff, but when they're involved in it,
Yeah,
it's a different story.
yes.
I have a great niece that was born blind, and about 3 years ago, I went up to Goshen and we did a garden for the school for the blind and hearing, vision impaired. And it was amazing how those kids could pick up the tomatoes and the squash plants by the feel and the smell. But they really liked those
Well, yeah.
yellow squashes that had the bumps on them. And like my niece said that the kids started eating stuff they wouldn't eat before because it came from their garden. White's Institute.
Yes. And they grow flowers, you know, and I think, you know, what a positive thing to do, you know.
They have built a garden center
Yes,
this
they
year.
have. They've been working on it.
I think that's wonderful.
I was over there.